6:06 p.m., Harlem, March 1940. Outside the 125th Street subway, dusk mixing with steam from the grates. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stepped onto the curb in a prison-issued coat that never fit his shoulders, hat brim low against the wind. Two plainclothes detectives held across the avenue, watching like they expected him to run. A vendor kept both hands on his cart and did not call out. A patrol car crawled past, tires hissing on wet pavement, then slowed as if waiting for trouble to introduce itself. Bumpy did not look at the cops. He started toward Lennox, steady as a metronome, while borrowed men spent his name too loud already tonight. 6:19 p.m. Lennox Avenue, a narrow bar with its front curtains pulled and its back room lit by a single shaded bulb. Bumpy entered without greeting, taking the table near the wall where sightlines stayed clean. A cup of coffee arrived and remained untouched. A row of men in suits played cards without dealing, watching the doorway instead of their hands. In the middle of the room, a thick-necked rival called Monk Carter held court, speaking loud enough for the doorman and the street to hear. Carter wore a new overcoat and a fresh diamond ring, proof of money that had not been earned in Harlem. Two uniformed officers stood by the bar, caps tilted back, as if they had come to enjoy the warmth. Their presence made the room a stage. Carter slapped a folded policy sheet on the table and pointed to a penciled column. "Since Johnson's been away, the bank's got new rules," he said. "Runners pay at my window. Protection comes through me." A few men nodded too quickly. The cops smiled into their glasses. A runner named Eddie tried to keep his voice level. "Bumpy's home," Eddie said, not to Carter, but to the room. The words landed and nobody repeated them. Carter's ring tapped the table, once, twice, until the sound became a warning. "Home?" he said. "Home don't mean in charge. A man does time. He comes out owing. That's the city." One of the officers chuckled and added, "Ain't that right? You fall behind, you stay behind." Carter turned his eyes to Bumpy, finally acknowledging the quiet wait at the wall. "Evening, Johnson," Carter said, smiling wide. "Heard you're walking again." He leaned in with a courtesy that was meant to bruise. "You want back in, you ask. You don't get handed nothing." Harlem's moved on. The insult did not come as a shout. It came as procedure, spoken in front of cops, runners, and bankers so the humiliation would stick. Carter lifted the policy sheet and held it out like a warrant. "Sign your name under mine," he said. "Show the boys you understand the new order." The officers watched Bumpy's hands, waiting for motion they could arrest. Bumpy's face stayed neutral. He did not reach for the paper. He looked past Carter to the men in the chairs, then to the officers, then back to the coffee cup. When he spoke, it was calm enough to sound like bookkeeping. "Put the sheet down," he said. "Nobody signs tonight." Carter's smile tightened. "Or what?" he asked. The room held its breath without moving. The mistake sat plainly on Carter's palm. He had tried to make Bumpy perform. Bumpy did not answer Carter's "or what" with heat. He let the silence stretch until the uniforms shifted first. Restless with a room they could not control. Carter tried to fill it with a laugh. "You've been locked up too long, Johnson," he said, sliding the policy sheet forward like a summons. Bumpy lifted the coffee cup and did not drink. He set it down with a small click, then stood with the same measured pace that had carried him out of the subway. He did not step into Carter's space. He placed his palm on the table between the paper and the ledger, claiming the middle without touching either. "Harlem pays on schedule," he said, "not on announcements." One officer smirked. "If there's trouble, we're right here." The line was meant as a warning, but it sounded like an admission. Bumpy turned his head and looked at both cops the way a bookkeeper looks at numbers. "You boys warm enough?" he asked. The older one answered, "Plenty warm." Bumpy nodded once, as if he had learned who was being kept comfortable. He turned back to the room. "Everybody keeps their hands where they are," he said. Card players froze with cards flat on felt. A banker started to speak and was stopped by two raised fingers. "No talk in front of uniforms," Bumpy said, and the banker became furniture. Carter offered a performance. "Step outside," he said, trying to drag Bumpy into a duel he could advertise. Bumpy refused to be cast. "No," he said. This is your show. Keep it. He reached into his coat and produced only a handkerchief. He wiped his fingertips once, slow, like he did not want the room's grime to follow him. Then he tapped the edge of Carter's policy sheet without taking it. You brought paper, Bumpy said. Paper has addresses. Carter's smile thinned. The cops waited for a shove, a strike, a reason. Instead, Bumpy looked to Eddie, a runner at the side wall. You still got the old route list? He asked. Yes, sir, Eddie said. Tear it in half, Bumpy told him. Eddie tore it. The rip sounded loud. Keep the half with names, Bumpy said. Burn the half with corners. What kind of trick is that? Carter snapped. Bumpy put on his hat. No trick, he said. Just a pause. He walked to the door, leaving his chair empty and his coffee untouched. At the threshold, he spoke, calm, to the whole room. Anyone who collected for me while I was away can keep collecting, he said. Anyone who collected against me can keep their receipts. He did not explain what the receipts would buy. Carter watched him go, waiting for violence that never arrived, and misreading the stillness as surrender. In the hallway, Bumpy paused at the wall phone as if it were part of the meeting. Flash Walker appeared near the kitchen door, suit neat, eyes quiet. Bumpy did not whisper. No street talk, he said. No boasting. Anyone asks, the bank is closed for counting. Flash nodded and wrote 3 names, collectors, not corners. Then tore the page out clean. Bumpy touched the torn edge with one finger, a small seal. Visits only, he said, and walked out into Lenox without looking back. Lenox Avenue took him without ceremony. A sedan rolled behind at a polite distance, detectives inside pretending not to care. Bumpy walked into a brownstone where a policy banker kept accounts in a parlor that smelled of starch and ink. 2 ledgers lay open like wounds. Bumpy did not touch the offered drink. He placed a plain envelope on the table, heavy with folded notes and a typed list. Front windows shut, he said. Only back rooms, no corner counts. The banker hesitated. That brings heat, he said. It brings order, Bumpy replied. Heat comes from noise. Bumpy moved on, climbing rear stairs and cutting through hallways that belonged to tenants who never asked questions. He descended into a church basement where a deacon kept a key ring and a wall phone. Flash Walker waited with carbon paper and a typewriter case. On the table, names of runners, cab drivers, doormen, and bartenders. Harlem's circulation system. Bumpy read the sheet once, then drew a single line under 3 names. These stay, he said. He marked 4 more. These get visits. Big Walt entered with a small packet of receipts. Precinct club tabs signed by officers who liked being paid to stand close. Bumpy glanced at the dates, the amounts, the handwriting. They're rented, he said. That means their distance is negotiable. Walt asked, by who? Bumpy tapped one signature. By the man who's pretending to replace me. Flash tore off a carbon copy and folded it into his pocket like a bill of sale. Bumpy gave instructions that sounded like errands. One courier would sit at a coffee counter on 116th and wait for Carter's collector to arrive with his hand out. Another would go to a tailor shop on 132nd and ask for credit, just to hear which name came up when the owner reached for the phone. No guns were requested. No boasting was allowed. Bumpy lifted the wall phone and asked the operator for a Harlem number. Mamie Hatcher answered with a steady voice. Close the fronts, Bumpy said. No street banks. If anyone asks why, tell them the books are being checked. Mamie did not argue. And Carter? She asked. Let him talk into empty rooms, Bumpy said. The deacon brought a superintendent's notebook, tenant signatures, delivery times, a truck plate written twice. Bumpy traced the plate with his fingertip. Mark the driver, he said. Mark the company. Paper walks farther than muscle. Flash copied it clean, making 3 versions without looking up. Bumpy buttoned his coat and left the basement with the papers divided and the visits scheduled, while Harlem kept moving above them like nothing had changed. At the corner, a patrolman who had smiled in Carter's bar leaned against his cruiser. Bumpy did not confront him. He stopped at the curb, read the nameplate, and spoke as if asking directions. Officer, "The alley behind 132nd gets crowded after midnight," he said. "If your captain wants quiet, tell him to post a man there and collect his overtime honestly." The patrolman stiffened. The suggestion carried a file inside it. Bumpy walked on before the cop could answer, leaving the choice to travel up the chain and change a pair of eyes. The first effect showed up as absence. Carter's collector walked into the 116th Street coffee counter with a grin and found a stranger in the stool he expected to own. The stranger read a newspaper and never looked up. No runner approached. No envelope arrived. The collector waited until the lights made him visible, then left with nothing, his confidence thinning with each step. On Lenox, policymen closed their front curtains and moved their counting tables away from windows. Runners stopped floating on corners. They moved through hallways, through kitchens, through church basements where voices stayed low. Cab drivers who had been taking Carter's calls began missing those calls, claiming they were out on a fare while idling a block away. Harlem did not riot, did not posture. It simply stopped feeding the men who had been eating loud. Carter tried to correct the silence by making it public. He returned to the bar with the same 2 officers, crowding the doorway so the neighborhood could see who protected him. "Open the bank," he ordered, loud enough for the street. The doorman said, "Kitchen's closed." Carter slapped the doorframe and demanded names. The doorman offered none. The officers looked down the avenue and saw fewer people to hassle, fewer easy arrests, fewer faces to scare into paying. Their authority had been purchased, but it was being starved. A raid followed because raids were what police understood. Squad cars rolled down 125th and stopped at the wrong stoop. The informant who usually stood on the corner was not there. The door that usually opened to a nod stayed shut. Officers climbed stairs and found a tenant family eating supper, offended and unafraid. The sergeant wrote nothing down that could be used later, because nothing had happened. Harlem had changed the schedule. Carter's men began to quarrel with each other. A Bronx boy accused a Harlem runner of hiding money. The runner held up his empty hands and said, "There ain't no corner count." A bottle clinked, a chair scraped, and the room went silent as if the city itself had decided the argument was not worth hearing. The runner walked out. The Bronx boy stayed, suddenly aware that staying meant being seen. Paper moved where bullets usually did. A truck company owner received a polite visit from a man carrying a typed list of plates and delivery times. "Your driver is being used," the visitor said. "If he keeps being used, he'll be the one standing in front of the judge." The owner swallowed and promised cooperation. A precinct contact received his club receipt with his own signature circled in pencil. No threat was written. The circled ink was enough. Carter searched for Bumpy to force a confrontation he could broadcast. He went to the clubs where Bumpy used to sit. He went to a barber shop that used to pass messages. Each place treated him like a stranger. He asked, "Where is Johnson?" and got answers like, "Don't know," and "Haven't seen him," and "Try downtown," delivered without fear because the fear had been replaced by policy. Days stacked without headlines. Cash flowed on shorter routes. Faces became fewer. The police made fewer callers because there were fewer corners to sweep. The city, accustomed to Harlem being loud when threatened, found Harlem quiet and therefore hard to police. Carter's operation thinned until it looked like paperwork without cash behind it. At the precinct house on 135th, a lieutenant stared at a blotter that had gone dull. Complaints without arrests. Arrests without seizures. Seizures without money. The officers who had stood beside Carter stopped receiving envelopes and began arriving late, then not at all, protecting themselves with distance. A captain asked where the informants had gone. A desk sergeant shrugged and said, "Pièce petite." "Folks ain't outside." Carter's last attempt at authority came through a telephone. He called a policy banker and demanded a meeting. The banker answered with a dial tone. He called a cab stand and promised cash. The dispatcher said, "No cars." He called a club owner and threatened trouble. The owner replied, "We don't host strangers." Carter's voice kept traveling, and each line came back empty. On Lenox Avenue, a new pattern settled into place. Runners appeared at the same minutes each night, not earlier, not later. Couriers carried grocery bags that never sagged. Church basements opened after services and locked again before midnight. A patrol car rolled through and found no crowd to push, no corner to tax, no noise to justify a raid. The street looked calmer, which meant the street belonged to somebody. In a back room above a laundromat, a bookmaker unfolded Carter's old policy sheet and used it to light a cigarette. The paper curled and blackened, printing disappearing into ash. A man at the window said, "Carter's finished." Another answered, "He finished himself the minute he tried to make it public." Carter left Harlem the way men leave places that no longer recognize them. Without a scene, without witnesses, moving fast and looking back too often. His two friendly officers stayed behind, suddenly careful with their hands and their jokes. Harlem did not announce a restoration. It operated it. By the time the city understood, the borders were already redrawn in practice, routes running, debts collected, protection paid on Harlem terms, and every question answered the same way. One name, spoken quietly, and obeyed. The paperwork in every back room matched that reality.